think that the thing of being a figurative artist is that you have that possibility of thinking around humanity and not think literally about things. And I think that's the beauty of what we do here, that we can actually be abstract around things. Well, coming from, I would say north, because everything like north of Denmark is north of Europe, but like coming from like the northern parts of Sweden, and my mom's side of the family has like a indigenous background, having like many generations of being nomadic. So for me, that was always like a natural thing, like having those stories of like the Sami heritage. It's home. That's always been the stories. And my grandmother and grandfather being painters, they always painted up in the mountains. So for me, like painting and the indigenous background has always been the same. Because going up, the landscape is very much the indigenous people because they live by the land. So those two things of connecting painting with that kind of culture has always been very natural for me. There was no mystery to painting, really. Well, of course there was mystery, but you realize the mystery was not painting, mystery was nature. So when you kind of grow up, you kind of like, you're a kid, you want to get into stories, you want to start seeing the cool stuff, but then you kind of slowly, it's not enough, so you keep on like building it up, and eventually you meet people that's like, oh, but you should look at this painter, or you should look at that, and it's kind of like a ladder. And I feel that's still going on. You come to Florence, you realize about the Renaissance, you realize about like Michelangelo, who did Michelangelo look at? So it's always like that ladder, like how deep can you get to like what is it about studying with nature? So when I started out, there was always that part of finding people in other cities. So I used to like get on the bus, going down to Stockholm, hanging with painters. And eventually they introduced you to another painter. I went to Prague. Eventually I met like one of the first students at the Water Street Atelier, like one of the fellows of like Jacob Collins' group there. And he said like, well, there's this Cecil Graves school. And then from there I just went home and I Googled Daniel. And I sent him an email. I don't think Daniel remembers this, but it's a nice story to know that like thanks to him, he actually showed me where the Florence Academy was. But then it took several years before even like being brave enough to apply for it. But I do wish I had like done it, like applied earlier even. And I think when you go through an academic program, which I think is like, it has its value. It has a very strong value because you don't have that many places to choose from when it comes to finding craft. Like finding like how do you learn to listen to nature, especially in the case of like being in like a art academy or like relying back on the 19th century art, is that how do you learn how to see nature? Because we're so rushed, we don't really see things, we don't use our senses. So when I was in school, the main thing was like putting a little bit aside of that creativeness and also like what is my weak leg? So maybe not just like pushing things out from the part where you want to influence things, but actually take influences. So basically it's the same thing as a conversation. It's like, how do you learn how to listen? And I think that's the hard thing of like being in an academy. Like I would say the method, yes, it's great that there's ideas like methods, but it's important creating an oasis for people where they can actually observe nature in a calm way, almost like shutting the rest of the world out and just kind of own their senses to a very high degree. So for me, that was the thing of just being in a place where it was okay to do that, to slow down. Then maybe I kept my side projects to the weekend. So I worked maybe like 5 days a week, just working hard from nature. Then in the weekends, like it's a vacation. I could just try to draw my figures from a memory. Because also the importance of memory is something that sometimes people miss, especially in this day and age of like photos, where we can just copy something. But memory is something that changes, something that evolves. Like memories are not always the same thing. Like yesterday's memory might not be the same in 10 years. So also learning how to listen to your memories to understand how do you, like a visual impression, for example. Do you really need all the information? When you think back in like memory, what is the key thing that you remember? So I think also like moving to Florence then like say 8 years ago now or something like that, that it just became stronger because you kind of slowly you go from like being a teenager and then you kind of start realizing how much value it is in your roots as well. Because when you're home, you take it a bit for granted. And also because then when you're not there, you can start imagining around it. You can start writing poetry about it. It's a bit about maybe romanticizing, but it's a good world to just create around. And it's also a way to kind of keep in contact with your roots and keep on going deeper. So also being in Florence, it's like, or in Italy in general, like there's so much archaeology. So you start seeing the importance of like civilizations and the connection between them. And then you realize like, well, the same thing goes with the indigenous people of Europe, that same value is there. So a lot of my paintings kind of come around from being up in that environment. I think all the paintings that are like behind me now and have always been done like sketch-wise when I've been up in the mountains, like a place where there's very little influences except you and nature. But that kind of like silence that happens allows your thoughts to kind of, you have time to recollect experiences and superimpose them on your influences. Some of these ideas, they started as one painting, and then they kind of started like budding off, like they kind of start like branching off into other paintings. So all of them come from like a similar feeling, but then they start becoming different projects. Instead of being just one painting, which can't contain that much information, it just becomes too much stuff going on at the same time. Then it becomes very important to choose like, okay, this is becoming its thing now. We can pick that fruit and we can do something with that, or we start planting that seed over here and let that grow by itself. So for example, some of these ones started a lot with, just like we were talking about like archaeology and other things, it's the freedom of allowing your thoughts to drift for a little bit. So mythology is also one of those places, like where religion, mythology is like, religion that is so old it's not even allowed to be called religion because it's so interwoven with culture. So for me it also became like very inspiring with like Nordic mythology, Sami mythology, also the religions that are based on not on the human in the center, but maybe nature and the animals in the center. So here for me was like the thing of connecting them in the ground. And this is a story of Biegolmai. It's probably one of the most important gods because it's the god of wind. So every morning he shovels the wind, like he has like these shovels, like branches, and he like shovels the wind out of a cave and like go out there, do your thing. And then in the night he kind of gathers the wind and puts it away. Because that's also what you will feel like in the night. There's usually not that much wind. It usually kind of dies down in the evening. So for me, it became an important thing of like the use of elements for change, which is also something for Sami cultures. Like the reindeers usually follow the wind. And that fascinates me so much with these old reindeer herders because they just been like listening and checking like where's the wind been? And by knowing the directions, they can kind of guess where the reindeers are going to be. They're going to be over in that valley. Because they always turn their nose towards the wind. And I think those are extremely fascinating things when you realize that the craft of, not just, like we have the craft of art, that we start listening to materials, but they have the craft of like listening to nature, which is something that's just getting so forgotten.